It's the TMZ Behind the Bar podcast with the TMZ lawyers, Jason Beckerman and Derek Kaufman.
Welcome, everyone, to Behind the Bar. This week we have an interesting sort of take on things. You guys are all familiar by now with the video of Joe Mixon, the Oklahoma football player who got into a physical altercation with a young woman in a bar in Norman, Oklahoma, where the University of Oklahoma is located. It ended with him punching her in the face very hard and dropping her to the floor. When this video broke, Derek and I were on the newsroom floor when we first saw it. And we had two very different reactions to the video, the full video, not the punch.
Well, first, all we could think was Ray Rice. I think that's what bubbles into the consciousness.
That's right. You have a football player striking a woman. In this case, it was not somebody that he previously knew.
Surveillance footage, everything.
Right, the whole thing. So we had very different reactions to it. As we watched the video in full, at first our reaction was similar, which is, oh my God, that was ugly. But then we watched the video in full. And Derek and I had different positions. Derek, I don't want to mischaracterize it, but Derek felt that not only had Joe Mixon committed a crime, but that the misdemeanor that he eventually pled guilty to was likely not sufficient enough to in light of the circumstances.
Sure.
I took a different position, probably less popular, certainly less popular, which is that I don't necessarily think that a crime was committed at all. And if one was committed, a misdemeanor at most would be the charge.
What's popularly known as the pro-woman beater position, right? not to mischaracterize your position.
I wouldn't say it's anti-woman beater,
right?
But
I make light of it, but that is a legitimate position. We're going to discuss it.
So what Derek and I are going to do here today is we're going to lay out our sides of this. Derek's going to sort of take on the role as the prosecuting attorney in this, and I would take on the role as what the defense would have argued. Again, the case is pled out. We have he's pled guilty to a misdemeanor. It was about a year ago. He did some probationary time and I believe some community service.
Yeah, I'll lay that out.
But go ahead, Derek.
Yeah, and look, we're not going to follow these roles too slavishly. Role play sounds kinky and weird for us to do. So, but
it didn't until now. But, okay.
But now I've just made it weird.
Right. So Prosecutor Derek, let me know, as sort of neutrally as possible what the facts are, and then what the argument is for why this guy should be
just
prosecuted.
The facts, ma'am. Dragnet style. Okay, so here's the incident. Back in 2014, Joe Mixon, running back for the Oklahoma Sooners, punched out a classmate named Amelia Molitor, not someone he knew well, but he fractured 4 bones in her face during an altercation at a place called Beckerman's Cafe near Oklahoma's campus, sort of a place they all hung out. He ended up being charged with misdemeanor assault, and he issued a public apology. He was suspended for the entire 2014 season, and now he's back as one of the stars of the team. They're going to a bowl game, and he will be playing in it because it's obviously a season
later. His suspension
later.
is ended.
Suspension is over.
Right.
Now, the surveillance video of this altercation has now come out. Even though the incident was in 2014, it was all kept under wraps. And to get ahead of it, because it was going to eventually be released, there was this side lawsuit about whether it was public should have access to it. They said they did. His lawyers said, let's get out in front of this and release the video. And it is graphic. I'll try to just give you the beats of it. So basically, the video shows that Molitor, the woman, and a male friend at a table. She summons Mixon over with a sort of hand gesture, and he comes over. It's silent like all surveillance video, and he seems to say something to her male friend. We've heard later that this was possibly a homophobic slur to
Mixon
him.
says something to Molitor's male friend.
That's right. And we've heard that Mixon says that the guy first said to him maybe the N-word, and maybe he responded in kind with the F-word. So it looks like there's an altercation. At this point, she jumps up, Amelia Molitor jumps up, pushes Mixon at first. He then fakes at her, sort of like jab steps at her and looks like he's going to punch her, but does nothing. She goes after him even harder and hits him in the face. At that point, he throws a devastating right hook that just drops her. She hits her head on the table as she goes down. It's one punch, it's clean, and she's down on the ground, and that's the end of the altercation. She's then attended to and gets up a few moments later.
And it is a vicious punch. I mean, this is a incredibly strong dude.
A running back for the Sooners.
Who throws a lightning right cross across her chin and drops her, in a heartbeat.
That's right. And so he pled, as you said, he actually pled an Alford plea, which we'll talk about later, but he was sentenced to the following: just 100 hours of community service, cognitive behavioral classes, $1,200 in fine, and as I said, he was suspended for the season in 2014, but he's now back with the team. So that's where we stand.
So the case is resolved.
And the charges will go away, by the way.
And the charges will go away
if he keeps his nose clean.
Keeps his nose clean through the probationary period. And then what we want to get into really is what do you think, Derek? I mean, you step in the shoes of the prosecutor. You fully believe this was justified to prosecute him and maybe even should have been charged as a felony.
Yeah, so let's dive in. He was charged with misdemeanor assault, which carries up to a year in jail for anyone who, and I think the words are important, willfully and wrongfully commits an act that grossly injures another person, okay? And she was grossly injured. There were facial fractures. He fractured a few bones and so forth. It's the same statute, by the way. The misdemeanor statute is the same one that punishes public urination. So a misdemeanor assault is in the same category as peeing outside of a bar. So
it's a low grade crime, as they say in the law.
A very low grade crime. And to me, when I watch this, Jason, I am shocked, and I think everyone who sees this kind of punch, because the amount of damage that she could inflict is capped. She is a slighter person. She does come at him very aggressively, but the punch that he throws to me is so disproportionate to the harm that she could possibly inflict by her aggressive outrage at whatever occurred in there, that this is a crime, and it's a serious crime because he's such a big football player that him throwing that punch is by definition to me disproportionate to what she could do to him.
All right, but you believe it goes beyond just a misdemeanor or urinating in public sort of standard. You think this is a...
I think you could push this to a felony because I think he unleashed such a vicious punch that it's aggravating circumstances in certain respects.
And the damages that she
like Mike Tyson
sustained
punching someone.
certainly could beget a felony, right? I mean, the
Sure.
damage she sustained were extraordinary, broken bones in her faces. You know, you don't come back from these 100%. My guess is she will have lifelong-lasting injuries as a result of this.
I think even you would acknowledge this could have been deadly, right? You see $1 Million Baby. She hits her head on the way down. You don't know what happens when someone falls that quickly and hits their head on the way down. This could have been very, very damaging to her in a permanent way.
Right.
It wasn't, and fortunately it wasn't. But.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, again, permanent is sort of a lasting thing. I'm sure she will suffer from scarring and from certainly internal injuries probably for the rest of her life and may suffer from pain for the rest of her life.
And my analogy to this is if I were in a fight with Mike Tyson could throw a devastating punch. Even though I'm a man and I'm somewhat stronger probably than Amelia Molitor, his level of punching is disproportionate to anything that I could do to Mike Tyson, a professional fighter.
All right, so Derek has laid out the case about why this guy should have been prosecuted, certainly for a misdemeanor, possibly for a felony. And let me sort of articulate the opposite position of why I don't think potentially it should have been charged as a crime at all. And certainly if it was, a misdemeanor would be the farthest along the spectrum you'd want to go. To me, this discussion, and I think you'd agree, is not about the emotions, not about biases, but about the law and whether the law that's in place, in this case Oklahoma law, whether Joe Mixon is guilty of a crime as per that state's laws. And though it may be tempting, and I'm tempted, and when I first saw this video, I was certainly tempted, and I've said it before, that any man who hits a woman is guilty of a crime. And if that man knocks that woman to the ground while hitting her, he may be guilty of a felony. But that just isn't the law. And Derek, do you look at the law?
Of course, I've looked at some self-defense. I believe you're going in that direction.
So let's play it out. So you looked at the law relevant to this case. And anywhere in the law, did you see anything that says it's a crime, regardless of circumstances, for a man to hit a woman?
Absolutely not.
Okay, so it doesn't say that.
No gender component in the law, even in the law that I read.
Right, and never is it a crime, regardless of circumstances, to do anything. There are always circumstances that justify any act, right? You can certainly kill someone in the act of self-defense.
Absolutely.
You can kill somebody for myriad reasons. You learn in law school about the various reasons. You know, an act of war, even if it's not self-defense, you can certainly kill someone.
There are justifiable circumstances for doing what he did.
Anything,
sure.
Right. And you don't believe, as a lawyer and an officer of the court, there should be a law declaring it a crime, regardless of circumstances, for a man to hit a woman, right?
This feels so Socratic. I feel like I'm being led down the primrose path into painting myself in a corner, and I know what you're doing. I went to law school too, Jason.
I'm just asking you a question. You agree that it should never be the law, regardless of circumstances, that a man should never be able to hit a woman, right? There are circumstances for everything.
That should absolutely not be the law. This shouldn't be a strict liability offense, right? This shouldn't be just if you hit, it's a crime.
So then the focus of this inquiry is not on Joe Mixon's act of hitting her, but the circumstances surrounding that hit.
I would agree with that.
And here's what we know. As the video opens, Mixon is having a conversation with Amelia Molitor. It looks calm. At some point, Mixon turns his attention to Molitor's friend. Molitor stands up. Alicia Molitor stands up.
I think it's Amelia.
Amelia, sorry. Stands up and with both hands puts her hands on Joe Mixon's chest and pushes him. And this is the first physical element of their confrontation at all. Before this, it looked calm in the video.
Yes.
At that time, when she pushed him, did Joe Mixon raise his fists up?
I think he took a fighting stance, but he didn't unleash a punch.
He didn't raise his hands up in
No,
any way.
well,
He feigned at her with
Vance
his head.
called it iffing. You sort of do that thing
sort
that
of-
we all know about.
Right. He kept them at his side, and he feigned towards her.
Mm-hmm.
And Molitor, at that point, reaches up and punches him pretty hard in the side of the head.
I mean, he said it felt like a punch from a dude.
Right.
This is an interview that we've seen that was a subsequent video.
And you've watched the video a few times. After Molitor punches him in the side of the head, did she make any effort in that? I understand it was a brief period of time to run.
Did she run?
Yeah,
No, I don't believe she ran. She's grabbing his face and punching
she
him.
punched him.
Yes.
And then she continued to stand up to him.
Yes.
And Mixon at that moment responded with the same response responded to him in the same way that he had just been attacked, which is a punch to the head.
Well, there's where I'll stop you. He did respond with a punch, but I don't think all punches are created equal. So punch for a punch, this is not Hammurabi eye for an eye time.
I got it.
Not all punches are created equal, and I think at that point, while I don't believe he had a duty to grab her wrists, I think you have a right to self-defense. You don't have to try to restrain her. He unleashed a devastating punch that is different in kind than the punch that she leveled.
All right,
at him.
so let me read you a little bit from Oklahoma law, and after I read this bit of law, it's one sentence, we can make a determination of whether or not he committed a crime.
I would love it.
A person who is not engaged in an unlawful activity, and Joe Mixon was not up until that point engaged in any unlawful activity, and who is attacked, and we know that he was attacked, we saw it on video, has no duty to retreat and has the right to stand his or her ground and meet force with force, including deadly force.
Yes.
So that's Oklahoma law. Let me
It's
start.
their stand your ground law, right?
So including deadly force, nobody responds. Anybody who has met with deadly force can't respond with deadly force. So no, hold on.
Right.
The law necessarily contemplates that somebody can respond with greater force than that which they have been hit with, because you can respond with deadly force to force coming at you, only if he or she reasonably believes it is necessary to do so to prevent the commission of a forcible felony, not proportionate forcible felony, but a forcible felony. You acknowledged earlier that Molitor did not walk away after she punched Mixon in the face. She continued to stand there. And if you watch this video, you are left with the inescapable conclusion that she had every intent of following up this push followed by a punch with additional physical force. The law specifically gives him the right to meet force with force, up to and including deadly force, if necessary to prevent the commission of an additional act of force.
So do you believe a reading of that statute that is defensible? Because you say the conclusion is inescapable. I'd like to try to escape it because I'm the prosecutor here. Do you honestly believe that the punch that she leveled would allow that Oklahoma's stand your ground law would allow the use of deadly force if Mixon then pulled a gun, George Zimmerman style, and fired into her face?
No.
No. Well, so but I believe your reading is getting you there, right? So I think if you don't concede that, then you can't say that any type of punch he throws falls under the stand your ground law, because you've now conceded that the including deadly force doesn't work under your circumstances, right? Because she came at him with force.
Well, you asked a question. Would any type of punch he throw be justified? Yes. It would not be justified for him to pull out a crowbar and hit her across the face.
Fair enough.
But a punch is not a crowbar.
Is there any punch that Joe Mixon could throw that you don't think he would find safety under the stand your ground law? Could he throw a punch that was too much, is what I'm asking.
The answer is no. He had just been punched in the face.
Yes.
Hard. He said it was like being punched by a man. And he's been punched by a man.
Perception, sure.
And his perception was he was punched by. And in
not
the video,
punched so hard that he wasn't able to unleash a devastating punch in response.
That certainly isn't the standard.
That isn't the standard. But if he were punched so hard, there would have been, I don't know, at least he would have gone on his heels somewhat. He instantaneously, almost instinctually, drops her with a devastating punch to the face. So if he was hit so hard,
it rocked him. It rocked him.
Bernard Hopkins was knocked out of a ring. I mean, if you're hit really hard, you
certainly, but it rocked him. You can see that his head snaps to the side upon being contacted by her hand. And again, she continued to stand up. There's every reason to believe that she was going to punch him again. She felt that she was justified in punching him, and that's not the discussion here, whether she was or not. She felt she was justified in pushing him. Mm-hmm. She felt he was justified in punching him. Mm-hmm. There's no reason to believe she didn't feel she was justified in punching him again. And at that moment, according to Oklahoma law, and everybody who's listening out there, you can choose to agree with this law, disagree with this law, hate the law, love the law, whatever you think about the law, that's emotion.
Absolutely.
What we're talking about is applying the law as written. Once she punched him in the face, and if she would have run, I agree, you can't chase her down and beat her up.
Sure.
Because there's no force necessary at that point to prevent an additional act of felony being committed.
Right.
So, but every reason to suspect that an additional act of aggression by her was going to be committed. He had a right to punch her in the face to stop that act.
Now, you look, force can be met with force. There's no duty to retreat. Obviously, you can't stalk her down, but that's not the situation we're in.
Right.
We're in stand your ground territory, but there's an overlay here of self-defense law that you will always get this jury instruction in a case such as this, because the stand your ground law is one thing, but non-deadly force can be used in Oklahoma. This is the way the jury instruction reads, what they would tell the jury how they should assess this situation. Non-deadly force can be used if the person reasonably believes that the use of force was necessary to protect himself from imminent danger of bodily harm. That's just the jury instruction, how it reads.
That makes total sense.
Do you believe, and this is it's a subjective standard rather than an objective standard. You put yourself into Joe Mixon's shoes, not a sort of a reasonable person. But the instruction goes on to say the amount of force used may not exceed the amount of force a reasonable person would have used. So that brings you into an objective standard. Like, what would a reasonable person? Would a reasonable person have used as much force as Joe Mixon used to drop Amelia Molitor with a vicious right hook? I think not. I think if you put that in front of a jury, I think you have a big problem.
I think you've effectively boiled this down to this issue. If somebody, so you've acknowledged.
And by the way, that nullifies the defense at that point.
You acknowledge that the law makes no distinction between a man and a woman.
No distinction at all.
Do you also agree that if it was a man who stood up to Joe Mixon, pushed him in the chest, and then punched him in the face, he would have the right to punch that man back in the face?
There's an unfortunate reality that we deal with.
I just asked a question that you're not answering the question.
In front of a jury, we deal with the unfortunate reality that this would look very different if I punched Joe Mixon in the face and he punched me back.
It would look different, but that's emotion. That's not application of the law. I get it.
I'll apply the law this way.
Okay.
Would it be different if I got into a fight with, and Mike Tyson, is a professional fighter, so maybe he's a deadly weapon, but assume just Mike Tyson is who he is and not a professional fighter, so it's not assault with a deadly weapon. But if I got into a fight with Mike Tyson and I grabbed at him like Amelia and he dropped me in the store, do you think that the jury would have sympathy for me given the amount of force that Mike Tyson leveled at me, even though we're the same gender?
You brought that on yourself. You stood up to somebody bigger and stronger than you, and you initiated the contact.
At what point does he have a responsibility as a much larger person? Andre the Giant could have crushed heads, but he didn't do it because he has a responsibility as a giant not to crush
Joe
people's
Mixon, had he
skulls.
jumped on her and continued pummeling her on the ground, totally different situation. One punch. She pushed him and then punched him in the face. He threw one punch back. I get it. Watching this video, it was ugly. But like I said, look, it's hard to ever justify a man beating a woman. I get that, and I'm not trying to argue that what he did was right. I'm just saying the law is the law, and everything that sort of I'm going for here is just based on what Oklahoma law is, and there's no way to escape it.
So look, Parker, there you have it. We've laid all of this out. We've got a guy who throws a vicious right hook, as Jason would admit, and drops this.
You're just
woman.
Gonna have to lay it out for him one more time. Last word, McGee.
I just want to know, where do you stand on this? You got Jason, stand your ground.
No.
You can throw any
Just
punch
give
to
it
drop
to him.
someone, or my damsel in distress. Where do you stand?
I think I'm going to have to go with the way the court originally decided, so I'll be agreeing with Derek.
Oh,
Well, that's a baby splitting.
it is. I love that baby split, though. And actually, I want to clarify how this thing actually ended, because it ended in a plea. There was no jury. We've done opening statements, closing arguments. There was actually no jury here.
Yeah.
What this guy did was plea, but he made a very interesting plea that I want to talk about for a second.
Derek's about to dork out, but it's actually kind of
Just
interesting.
Indulge me for a second.
Yeah.
There are actually 4 types of pleas. You can plead not guilty, and you can say, let's take this to trial.
Yeah.
You can plead guilty, admit to the crime, and maybe hope for some leniency because you admitted it. You can plead no contest or no low contender.
Hold on. Let's stop on that. No contest, very important. You guys have all heard it. I get a ton of questions about what is a no contest plea.
Sure.
No contest means I am in fact pleading guilty to the crimes as charged.
You're neither admitting nor denying. You're just saying the state has enough.
But it has the every bit of effect of a guilty plea. The one real difference between a guilty plea and a NOLO or a no contest plea is that it can't be used against you in civil court.
That's right.
So you can plead guilty to a crime of beating someone, but then typically, if the person then sues you for beating them up, you can say, look, they pled guilty in a criminal court, therefore judge, jury, they're guilty.
Right.
But here, with a no-lo plea, they can't use it against you in a civil trial.
That's
so
exactly
that's
right.
a no-lo case.
That's exactly right. Because in essence, you're saying, I don't have, the state has the goods on me, and I'm not going to fight it, but you're not actually admitting to doing it in the same way. So you get convicted, but you're not guilty in the same sense.
So one more plea.
Here's the last plea. This is what he did. It's called an Alford plea. There's a famous Supreme Court case back in 1963 where a guy was accused of first-degree murder. His name was Henry Alford. There were no witnesses. And to avoid, he thought the state had a really good case. They just had great circumstantial proof, but this guy denied, all day and all night that he did this crime.
Right. So lots of evidence against him, but
a lot of
he
evidence.
insisted it wasn't him.
So to avoid getting the death penalty, what he did was what has become known as an Alford plea, which is to maintain your innocence and say, I absolutely did not do this crime, but the state, the prosecutors, have a good enough case to convict me. So it's kind of like no contest, but plus. You're allowed to, when you plead no contest or guilty, you can't then say, but I didn't do it.
Yeah.
That sort of upsets the justice system. But in this one instance, you can say, I am absolutely innocent, but I'm not going to waste your resources. You got the goods on me. It looks really bad. Therefore, I Alford plea.
All right. Nerding out with Derek Kaufman. That was fascinating. And I just heard a sound.
It sounds like mail time.
It does.
Remember to write in your questions and comments to behindthebar@tmz.com. First one's up from Charlie. I read on your website that cops are now investigating the security guard who was caught doing something inappropriate during the Chargers game recently. What type of criminal liability could he possibly be looking at?
Pray tell, what inappropriate?
So this guy, right, the security guy, one of these red-shirted security dudes at the Chargers game last weekend, somebody in the stands noticed that he's standing there. He's about 4 feet from one of the Chargers cheerleaders.
Yes.
His hand is in his pocket, and he is furiously
Is there
moving his hand back and forth in his pocket right next to his genitalia. The only reasonable rationale for that is that he's masturbating.
And we've talked about this before. That's really all you can do furiously. He is furiously masturbating.
Right.
And it's one of those no doubters. Maybe there's a hand warmer that you could say is in your pocket if you're slowly caressing your pocket, but
Derek.
he is doing something that leaves very little doubt that he is indeed masturbating. It seems to the naked eye that he's moving in that, gesturing in that direction. Now, what kind of trouble can he get in, Jason?
I don't know.
Public masturbation, though, is certainly going to be an offense,
Yeah,
kind of on the lines of public indecency.
This happened in California. There's a prohibition against lewd acts, including in specifically masturbation, and that can be charged for. I looked up indecent exposure when the story broke yesterday. You actually have to expose yourself for indecent exposure. It can't be one of those things where you're just suggesting that your penis is there or whatever. So you can't be charged with that, which is a big difference because indecent exposure is you have to register as a sex offender, but you don't for a public lewd act.
Yeah, this is basically closer to fraudering or something along those lines when you're on a subway and someone rubs up against you for sexual gratification. But what's interesting to me is, and I do have this actual question, is you're not near a school, but at a football game, you're near children. There's a high likelihood that there are children in the vicinity because you're at a sporting event.
Interesting.
I think that might actually make a judge or a prosecutor want to throw the book at you even more.
Yeah, to the extent they can. It'd be interesting to see if they could have a child witness come forward and say, I actually saw that happen, because I think you're right. It's a really good point. I think his charges could be substantially greater if a child witnessed it. If a parent comes forward and said, my child saw that and is traumatized by it, you have a different class of crime. That's really interesting.
Yep.
The next one up is from Tiffany. With the reality TV episode you guys did last week, it got me thinking. Has a contestant ever successfully sued a TV show or network for using editing to portray them incorrectly or even making it seem like they did something that they didn't?
What a great question.
Terrific question. I don't think Derek or I know the answer offhand. I would say I really, really doubt it. And the reason is because every single person who appears on one of these reality shows or any television show signs a multi-page release that really does give the production company the full right to do with that footage what they want, and it will specifically call out, we have full editorial discretion here, we can do with your image whatever we want, we have absolute authority and your permission to do it with what we want.
I have very little add. I've seen these contracts before. There are many pages of very small boilerplate type print that is so favorable to the producer, gives them virtually carte blanche.
Yeah.
They may even be able to take your firstborn son.
The last one's from Devin. It's a little bit different. If you two guys could create your own law, what would it be? Only catch is, you both have to agree on it.
It's a great question. It sort of puts you in the Rawls' original position, right? Like, what would you do if you could create a society you want and make your own laws, Jason?
That he who cooks dinner cannot have to clean the dishes also.
Oh, I love that. You made sort of tablets, sort of. You gave us commandments. Like,
Yeah.
I would mandate raises for in-house lawyers. I don't know.
Yeah.
That seems like a good one. Mandatory
Yeah.
pay increase or something.
Thou shalt not covet your neighbor's wife unless she's really cute.
Unless she's, yeah. There's got to be a carve out, right? I think that's all we have.
Ridiculous. Sorry,
That is all
guys,
for mail
about
time. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, thanks everyone. See you next week. Thanks for watching. If you want more nerdy deep dives into the legal side of celebrity news, hit our subscribe button right here.
And check out our previous episodes over here.